everybody for attending today's boardroom. This is obviously about retention, which is quite a hot topic at the moment, given the recruitment markets and the Great Resignation. So without further ado, I'll just hand you over to Marion. Thanks, Marion.
Thank you. Do you want to switch it across so I can share screen? Be good. Yeah, welcome. Yes, so we picked this topic a little while ago because everything was talking about this phrase of the Great Resignation that was coined back in May by a professor in the States. And if you look, there's so much stuff that's coming out about it. But actually, what does it mean in reality? And I think one thing to put it into perspective is to recognise that intention to quit is very different from actually leaving. So the figures of people thinking, oh yes, I'll change my job, against the people that are actively working and looking at it, there's going to be a big gap. But nevertheless, if we look at the wider market, we can see that it's potentially going to be or could be a challenge, particularly in some sectors. So in the, I'm just trying to keep our chat and room thing as well. We can see in August, for the first time ever, the number of open jobs passed 1 million. And the last labour market outlook had the most optimistic outlook for a long time, probably most optimistic if you are looking for a job. So 47% of organisations were actually saying they had hard to fill vacancies. So vacancies that are proving difficult, particularly around construction and healthcare. I don't know what, and we've got a mix of industries today. And what organisations were doing to try and fill those vacancies were, half of them were actually increasing wages, and we know that's only actually a very small part of what actually brings and certainly keeps people in organisations. 44% were upskilling staff, 27% were bringing in more apprentices, and 20% were increasing job quality. But we also know that business confidence is at its highest since March 20. And what we're seeing as this cycle of people thinking about leaving and changing jobs is actually similar to what we saw in 2009, so sort of the picking up after the economic crash of 2008. So it's something that's been seen before. But what we really want to think about, is this actually what's happening? Is it what we are seeing? We're hearing about it, but what's actually brought you here today? So let me see how many we've got. I'll stick you. Oh, I haven't got any weather rooms. I haven't got any breakout room options. There we go. Right, so now breakout rooms. Right, so I'll put you into a couple of breakout rooms. So actually what I'd like you just to think about at this moment, what's happening in your organisation, and actually maybe even think about, if we look at those figures, then the chances are that some of the people in this room here are actually having similar thoughts about changing jobs. So actually, what do you think is happening in your organisation in relation to this perceived intention to quit or Great Resignation, however you want to call it? So I'll just put you into a couple of rooms. So there should be about 6 of you. If you haven't got your camera on, I hope that you'll feel able to put it on when you get into a room, because obviously then it makes a better conversation. So we'll just have just 5 minutes. You just have a bit of a chat as to what you think is happening in your organisation in relation to people leaving or thinking of it. And I'll see you back after. Welcome back. So what things were coming up in those discussions? Is anybody happy to share just a quick summary of what things were coming up? We were having other people join, so we were having a chat in the main room as well. But what was coming up in yours? Somebody from Estelle, Joe, your group, but don't leave Joe to do it.
Jane, do you want to chat? We were still in the middle of about talking, Marion. I think we could have probably gone on for another 5 or 10 minutes in our group.
I know, but we always know that time runs away with these sessions, so sorry about that.
Jen, do you want to share?
Well, what we were talking about, and everyone seems to be having similar problems, is that the requirement for people to come back into the office seems to be having an impact on whether people, well, attraction, but retention as well, that whether or not they're willing to stay, and not having that hybrid option available. If people have been having the same problem with that, what they've done about it, if they've managed to convince people to come into the office, how they did it, or they've been able to reduce the impacts of that, not having that option available, because it just seems to be at the top of everybody's list at the minute, that they don't want to have a role that is completely office based, whereas if you're offering that, that's what people are leaving as a result of it. They're you know, voting with their feet.
Yeah, and I mean, when it's an absolute reality like that, then I think that's a tougher one to actually crack. I mean, you know, we are not going to come away from this half an hour discussion with magic answers, sadly. Sorry if that's what you were hoping. But, you know, I think recognising sometimes, are we really challenging ourselves? You know, do they have to, is there some midway point? You know, when we talk flexibility, you know, how can we create, if we're losing really good staff, where can we create some form of solution? I mean, yeah, we know some people are not going to compromise. They've made the decisions, and, you know, that ultimately that's their choice. But sometimes I hear organisations taking a stance, and you think, well, actually, you know, is that really to everybody's benefit? Can we think more creatively?
I agree, Marion, but I think it's also, I think we're slightly thwarted at the moment, and this is probably a whole session for a different session, but I think the whole hybrid working thing, I think some of us, certainly we were starting to get into a bit more, okay, here's a bit of a framework. I mean, ours is we want people to come in a couple of times a week or something. And then once all the COVID anxiety starts all over again, it's really frustrating, because you sort of feel like you're taking a few steps backwards again, because then the environment you've created that you think will encourage people goes back. So I think the whole hybrid working thing has to be really flexible at the moment, because the environment, the pandemic environment we're in. But that's probably a whole different topic for another day. We also talked in our session, admittedly I joined a bit later, but we talked quite a lot about the difficulties of recruitment at the moment, and how the salaries have gone absolutely mad in certain areas, and how we were losing people. I mean, we've in my business, we've lost some middle management, bad people, but fairly average, not our superstars, and they've gone for like senior roles of 6-figure salaries, and we're just absolutely blown away. But I think the market is, I've never known the market like this. It is mad at the moment. And then we got talking about brands and whether your brand helped or hindered within a
I mean, the salary one is such a complex, because salary might attract, but it won't ultimately retain. So, you know, it'll be interesting to see what's happening in a year's time, whether all these people that have moved because they've been seduced by a salary, actually whether that keeps it. So, you know, that time will tell. And where we were talking in the main room was also, you know, does it almost, you know, this mass resignation, great resignation, whatever terminology, you know, does it become a self-fulfilling prophecy when the media is talking about it so much? Do people think, oh, perhaps I should be looking for a job? Whereas actually something is not right where you are now for you to even start, you know, unless somebody's actively headhunted, you know, a job doesn't land in somebody's lap. So something will be prompting them to make those initial inquiries. And arguably, if somebody's fully engaged and enjoying their job, you wouldn't be doing that anyway. So it's about that step back, isn't it? Sorry, somebody was saying something?
Oh yeah, I was just on that engagement point, because I can only echo the salary issue, because what we're seeing, so our business wasn't doing very well in the past 2 years, and now it's picking up, but it's picking up for the competition as well. And they're very aggressively approaching all our employees, and they're going for significantly higher salaries. But when we look at what's actually happened, is that we weren't very good at engaging and keeping them happy in the first place. And that's why the salary is just the last bit, I suppose, where they're going for. I mean, it's definitely something where we're now trying to run that strategy of how can we actually make this a better place for people to work in terms of their development, their upskilling, their long-term career path, etc.
I think that's a really good point, that, Anna. It's about, you know, looking internally about what you can be doing. And I think it doesn't always cost a lot of money. You know, sometimes it's just a matter of saying thank you. I'm recruiting for a role at the moment, and I've never really known a business like it in terms of engaging the employees, and they do all sorts of stuff, and they only sort of gave me a few nuggets of some of the things that they're doing, but people can get like engagement points and things like that, and they do all sorts of activities around it for people to get these points, and then they can spend the points on different personal things that they want, or holidays, or whatever it is. But they do all sorts of things like employee of the month, which I know some of it's bog standard, but you'd be surprised that so few businesses put focus and on emphasis onto actually engaging the employees that they've got working for them. So I think you're spot on there, Anna.
And when we were planning this, Jo, I was asking you, what you're finding from your perspective. What are the reasons candidates that are coming to you? It was quite a long list you came back with. Do you want to share a bit what you're finding? What's prompting people to be starting to look?
Yeah, I mean, we've just we're sort of just talking about this in our breakout group. Then one of the biggest reasons at the minute is people are looking to move because they haven't got the hybrid working. And they want it, and I totally get it, and I can see it from both sides. Really, I've got a couple of clients at the moment who are insisting that candidates have to be in the office 5 days, and one of it is because of what their business does. Everybody else has to be in the business, so they've just made a blanket decision. So I get that. But when there's lots and lots of other roles out there where people have the option of doing hybrid, and because it's a candidate's market, candidates can think, well, I'm not going for that role because there's, God knows how many other roles. The other one is, which it is a reason that's always been there, is in terms of missold the role. So there's a lot of people doing a role that, they said this wasn't what I signed up for. Other candidates they took a job at the beginning of COVID as a bit of a knee-jerk reaction because there wasn't a lot of other roles out there, so they're now sort of thinking it's not for me and looking for a move. The salaries, which we just discussed, jumping for a higher salary. The list is endless, really.
Thank you. So what's coming across very clearly actually is that, most of the items on the list are actually the ones that have been there all the time, but the one that is the big one at the moment is actually that hybrid flexible working. And that aligns with, other things that we're reading about, lots of people have used this last couple of years to sort of recalibrate, haven't they? It's the word I've been using a lot. And actually people are making those decisions about changing for, real positive lifestyle reasons, or, actually what they want from their career. So you can look at that as positive reasons for change. But then people are also leaving for negative reasons around that experience at work, the whole burnout, we're seeing it in some sectors in particular. And, arguably a lot of those things are going to be very difficult to change. And what would you actually consider to be a good turnover rate, actually, if you what do you consider as a healthy turnover rate for an organisation? You want to throw a figure? Generally thought of as 10%, because you need some change. That's in a larger organisation. Because if you have no change, things can stagnate, and you do want some new blood, new ideas. So 10% is what you're arguably what you'll be aiming at. But actually thinking about how you can manage that and being proactive around that. And let me just share this. I'm getting a bit of background noise somewhere. I don't know if somebody's not on mute. That could be helpful. This was a survey Randstad completed quite recently of 6,000 people, and I thought these figures were quite interesting, and actually in terms of what appears to be the confidence people feel about potentially moving to a job, which certainly is borne out from what people have been saying about your market conditions in certain sectors. So people are feeling confident about moving, which makes it tougher. So thinking about this, we have exit interviews, and by the time we get to an exit interview, actually we're too late. with somebody is disengaged, we might manage to lure them to stay by, upping their salary, but we know that's usually only a short-term fix. If somebody has got to a point where they were actually going, you don't usually manage to retain them for that long. And there's a concept that we actually don't really use much, which was introduced by somebody called John Sullivan, Dr. John Sullivan. You can find quite a lot of information, but actually the idea of a stay interview. Actually, the information that we need to find within our organisation, we've actually got access to. There are so many surveys and things actually out there, but the surveys you see are not specific to your organisation. There are some things we know that are wider issues. We know in terms of having lost a lot of workers from the EU, we know the particular challenges of healthcare, hospitality. But some of those weren't new anyway. They were always ones with higher turnover. But actually, how could you have conversations with people to actually find out, well, A, to collect data, but B, to actually increase that loyalty, increase that connection. So he recommends this process of a stay interview. It doesn't actually have to be one-to-one. Some of this you could just do via some form of employee survey, engagement survey, a lot of it. But, appreciate somebody. How often do you actually just take the opportunity to have that conversation, line manager to team member? I really appreciate what you bring to this, and specific things. I'm not talking about an appraisal, but just that noticing what they've done. What makes them stay? Why do they like staying here? What is there about this organisation that they would recommend to somebody else? And what would actually make that even more? The sticky factors. What would increase that loyalty? And what might make them think about leaving? What are the things that actually are not right for them? And this isn't about making, huge promises or anything. It's actually about trying to understand what are the things that might be contributing to people leaving, and how could we do something with that? There's, lots of different ideas out there, but I think oh, excuse me. My cat's just decided to have a cat fight with somebody with another cat through the window. It's scared the living daylights out of me. So there's lots of ideas as what is important, and this is a report from Culture Amp. If any of you saw this, they do a lot of really interesting work about engagement, about that transparency. How are you building trust? How are you having open communication with people? How are you fostering that vulnerability of staff? That the trust is a massive thing. Flexibility. What does this actually mean in practice? This isn't just about hybrid working. And how does it be put into practice? And how does that link in with the culture? Because I think I personally, I would have put culture at the top, because I think that actually all the other things feed into culture. But, how does your flexibility work in reality? Has it created an always on culture that is potentially going to impact on burnout? Or have you got a culture that genuinely enables, empowers flexibility, and people work when it suits them, and there's not an expectation of responding at a time when it doesn't work for them? Yes, we have to look at pay and benefits, and we need to make sure that we are continuing to get feedback, actually listening to. We talk about communication, and we always talk about communication as telling our employees, but actually communication, the most important part from my perspective, is actually the listening. How are we understanding what the employees actually want? So my thinking is actually so much of the information we need, we actually have available to us. So I'm going to give you an opportunity to have a chat in groups again, and to think about, what can we be doing to understand what are the challenges? And I'm not trying to make this too simplistic. I know some of this is a wider market things that we have far less control over, but actually having an understanding of that is important. But actually, if we bring it into our organisation in terms of the things that we can control or influence, what are we missing? What are we not understanding that's important to our staff that we could do something about? And some of it might be very small things, but actually if we can stop people moving from that general vague intentions, yes, I might find a new job, to actually starting to look. If we can get in a beginning of that, I think that, you know, that is a huge thing that we can do as a proactive. And I think in terms of from the HR perspective, then we have a huge opportunity to influence. So have a chat in groups of all the things that, you know, we've been talking about, or you've thrown in as ideas, the things that I put up there in terms of the culture amp recommendations, the idea of a stay interview, how that might work if you think that that's practical. How you would implement that. So say it's not about creating expectations that you're giving them an opportunity to basically tell you exactly what they need. Well, it is, but it's not about saying you're going to be able to deliver it all. It's about having those open conversations. Okay, so where are we? I'm going to give you 10 minutes on that to see, as you know, with all these groups, actually, we have so much expertise and ideas in the room that actually, hopefully you get a lot from having those conversations. So let me put you into, I'll keep you, well, you're sort of in the same rooms, but you've got a few extra people in. I'll give you 10 minutes, and then if somebody from the group will be happy to chat and just give a bit of feedback to what you're thinking about in your room, that'd be great. And I'll see you back then. Right, so, joining now. Right, what was coming up in your conversations? What was useful for you when you were sharing thoughts?
Anna or Emma, just either of you two want to share what we were discussing?
Yeah, I was saying that we're going through a big restructure, so that's part of our issue in terms of bringing 8 organisations into one, which is why we're hemorrhaging staff, I think. But some of the issues around culture and how that's sort of transferring across, and whether people are willing to wait 2 years before the new organisation actually takes shape and becomes a live organisation.
Wow, that's a big challenge, isn't it? Yes, without the wider COVID world, that would be a tough one to be dealing with anyway. Yeah. So is that focus on the engagement bit all the way through, isn't it? Yeah. What else is coming up?
Paula, you had a couple of bits to contribute. Do you want to share some of the points that you raised? You just unmute yourself.
You on mute, Paula?
No, I couldn't get back. I couldn't get the thing back.
All right.
Back up. Well, when we're talking about Intel, I said, you know, there's one-to-ones and PDRs, staff surveys in the NHS, wellbeing surveys. So there's lots of information that you can get from staff to inform. Also, you can get broad reports. I didn't mention this in the group, but obviously we get stuff from occupational health in an anonymised kind of way. In our forensic division, one of the exec directors used to run stay interviews, which were quite successful, but very labour intensive. But you know, they got some good results out of that, and it was important, I think, that it was the most senior person in the division that was doing them, so people thought that somebody was actually interested. I think that's what I said in the session.
We were saying similar during part of our breakout that we've got quite a lot of information from individuals this year, whether it be in employee engagement pulse surveys or future of work, where we asked different questions. But one of the things that we were all saying in our group, how much we like the idea of stay interviews, and we wondered if they could be woven into, well, it was me that was saying, because we're heading into end of year reviews, and we wondered if they could be woven somehow into end of year reviews, and not necessarily guised specifically as stay interviews, but more a conversation about an individual's intention. We said that we were talking in forked tongues as we do in HR sometimes, but it's a way of extracting really good information that will help us in terms of not necessarily succession plan and SWP, but just in terms of understanding what an individual's intention may be for the next 6, 9, 12 months.
Mm-hmm. What other conversations were you having with the idea about the stay interviews? because we don't use them much, do we? Until I think they're only used at just before an exit interview type stage, when by then, I do think by the time somebody has actively got to job hunting, it is quite difficult to pull that back.
Yeah, you'd be surprised though, Marion. I mean, I've had experience in the past few months where I've lost a couple of candidates to do different roles because they've received counter offers. And I think counter offers are great, but they're only short term because they don't really change your real reason for wanting to leave. And that reason that you wanted to leave will pop its head again at some point in the future. And, I've sort of said to the candidate, well, it's great that they've given you a counter offer, but why didn't they just pay you that from the beginning?
Yeah. And absolutely, and I think that's what's really interesting over the next year or so is what's going to happen with salaries, because the salary will be what makes somebody jump, but it won't keep them. And then our employers got themselves into deep water because they've then got caught into an unrealistic salary market that's not sustainable. So I think it's how, as organisations, you get that balance right. You have to be competitive. You need to be at market rate to get equal access to a pool of people. But actually, that's not what's going to make people really stay. But exactly, as Joe just said, we want to be making sure, are we paying the people that we've got the right rate? That's going to stop them. So not to be exactly as you're saying, Joe, offer them more just as they're about to go. They want to feel valued. And I think with the stay interview idea, I think it is different from an appraisal. I guess a lot of it will come in to an appraisal, but I think the whole intention of a stay interview is different. And I think the contract of that meeting would be different. I think people come into an appraisal with a slightly different expectation. So I think, and it's a much more personal thing. It's making somebody feel valued, and, we want to understand what's important to you about wanting to work here and how we can make that experience even better. And somehow, to me, that sits outside an appraisal type conversation.
What I meant was that the information you get an inkling that people are feeling.
So I think somebody else said something about almost combining them. Yeah. So I think it's thinking about what is the purpose of it. As we said at the beginning of this, we can't come out of this 3/4 an hour seminar. We spent a light bulb moments of how we're going to change it. But I think for me, the main message is about recognising we have access to a lot of the information we need within our organisations, and a lot of it is about how individual employees are made to feel. About interaction on a day-to-day basis with their organisation, with their manager. And we do have a lot of control over that. That's actually not cost dependent. That's about how we're made to feel. That's the psychological contract, psychological safety that we're hearing so much more about. So if we just looking at time, I'm looking on that button. What is that button? And to sort of wrap it up, that I think you have the reasons, you have the information in your within your organisation that you need. All the headline data that you see actually doesn't tell you anything about your organisation. You'll know what's special to your organisation. So what I'd like, just as the last few minutes for you to think about, if you think about the particular challenges, limits on resources and the world your organisation operates in, where is your time and energy best spent now? Just each have, I think about, because often we get so tied up with the doing on a daily basis that actually, if you were to think about this retention, this potential great resignation in your organisation, where is your time and attention best spent now? And try and make a note, ideally, of a particular action or two that you could take that might help address that in your organisation. I know those of you that are in, I think we're a couple of NHS people, it's a massive problem, as in, it's not something that you're going to be able to solve from your desk, sadly, but, where can you make a difference? it's a topic that's particularly close to my heart, with a paramedic as a daughter who's finding life very tough at the moment. So, I know it's an unsolvable thing, but what difference can you make from the opportunity you have from your role? Anybody got anything they want to share?
I think for me, this was part of the conversation I was having, which is what made me a little bit late, for which I apologise again. I think it's about creating a culture and an environment where people feel engaged and rewarded. And it's not a monetary reward, because we talk about salaries, but you've got to look at it as a full remuneration package, but also, as well as that remuneration package, why people are coming into work, make it a reason why people want to come into work. Are they being recognised, or being part of the organisation, should I say? Are they being recognised, as not in a monetary perspective, but are they having those thank yous? Is there good employee engagement? Is there plenty of development and growth opportunities for individuals, and so on and so forth? Do they feel part of that organisation? Do they feel proud to work for that organisation? And that's the culture that you want to create. And having that differentiating yourself from the next person along, or the next organisation along. It's difficult, and it's not easy to maintain, but I think for me that's the biggest thing. That's what's kept me with organisations in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. It's how you feel at work, isn't it?
Yeah.
How you're made to feel.
Yeah.
And some of that is, as you say, it's just a very small action.
Tiny.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you for joining us today. I hope it's given you food for thought, even if not a magic wand to solve the challenge. But hopefully we will see you back at another one. Jo, let me hand you back so you can remind people what we've got coming up. Well, I think this might be the last one for this year, isn't it?
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. So thanks very much for joining, everybody. We really appreciate your attendance. Myself and Amy are in the process of organising some events for next year. So as soon as they are all organised, I will drop you a quick email to let you know, and then you can sort of sign up, and hopefully we can see you then. But thanks very much. And if we don't see you before, have a lovely Christmas.
Could we just ask for any ideas? If you've got any ideas, because we're catching up in a couple of weeks to plan topics for the next lot of Boardroom. So we've usually got quite a long list, but if you've got ideas that you can let us know, that would be really helpful, so we make sure it meets what people want. Thank you. Right, sorry, I'll shut up now, Jo. Thank you.
Thanks, Jo.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.